The flashing blue lights in the rearview mirror did not scare her. They irritated her. They arrived like a mosquito in a quiet room, small, predictable, and stupid enough to think it mattered. Nia kept both hands on the wheel and let out one slow breath through her nose as the old sedan rolled beneath the glow of a dead street lamp. The road was almost empty, the hour late enough for decent people to be home and dangerous men to feel brave. Behind her, Officer Grant Mercer sat high in his cruiser, like a man on a throne. To him, the badge clipped over his chest was not a promise or a duty. It was a permit. It gave him permission to interrupt, to accuse, to humiliate, to turn a lonely stretch of highway into his own private stage. When he first saw the faded blue Toyota, he did not see caution or discipline. He saw a black woman alone in a modest car, shoulders straight, speed perfectly legal, and he translated that composure into insolence. No expensive lawyer sticker, no man in the passenger seat, no luxury plate, no visible witness. Easy work. He smiled to himself as he flicked the lights again, letting the colour wash over her rear window. In his mind, the stop was already over. He would lean in, press hard, watch her stumble over fear, then drive away feeling taller than he was. What he did not know yet was simple. Before the night was over, this roadside stop would grow teeth. Nia signalled, eased on to the gravel shoulder, and watched his cruiser settle behind her at a crooked angle that pushed part of its nose into the lane. Intimidation parking, not for safety, not for visibility, for pressure. It was the kind of move meant to make a driver feel trapped before a single word was spoken. In the mirror, she saw the door open and the officer unfold himself into the damp southern night with slow theatrical purpose. She noticed everything. The hand resting too close to the holster, the slight roll of his shoulders, as if he were preparing for a confrontation he secretly hoped to have. The chin lifted half an inch too high, the walk that tried too hard to look casual and landed somewhere between swagger and threat. Men like him never understood how obvious they were. They thought cruelty looked like confidence. Nia lowered the window only halfway and kept her hands visible at the top of the wheel. Her face stayed neutral, but her mind was already moving ahead. He preferred the passenger side approach. Good. That meant he liked forcing people to twist in their seats, liked making them feel off balance. He leaned down enough for her to catch the faint sour smell of stale coffee and gum. She understood him immediately. This was not a man responding to danger. This was a man looking for a stage, a man who had done this before, maybe many times, and had learned that fear usually arrived before facts did. She was not afraid of him. She was careful, because men who enjoyed power were often sloppiest when they felt most secure. License and registration. No greeting. No explanation. No hint of why she had been pulled over. Just a hard command dropped into the car like a stone. Officer Mercer leaned closer, one forearm resting against the roof, his other hand still hovering near the grip of his weapon, as if ordinary paperwork might turn into a gunfight. Nia kept her voice even. "Good evening, officer. May I ask why you stopped me?" The question was simple, lawful, and polite. He treated it like an insult. "I asked for your license and registration," he said, each word pressed flat with irritation. "Do not make me repeat myself. My wallet is in my bag," she replied. "I'm going to reach for it slowly." His jaw tightened. "Don't move." For a brief second the night seemed to narrow around them. Gravel. Engine hum. Flashing blue reflections sliding over the dashboard. He was no longer performing procedure. He was performing control. Nia did not argue. "You asked for my identification, and now I'm telling you to keep your hands where I can see them." His tone rose, sharp and eager, the voice of a man who wanted resistance badly enough to invent it. "You people always want to act smart first." There it was, not hidden anymore, not traffic, not safety, not law. She held his gaze. "I haven't done anything wrong." Mercer gave a humorless smile. "Bye." The stop had just changed shape, and they both knew it. Nia opened the door slowly and stepped out into the humid dark with both hands visible, one empty palm lifted slightly away from her body to make the motion clear. Gravel shifted beneath her shoes. The cruiser's lights painted her face in pulses of blue and white, turning the roadside into something unreal, half traffic stop, half theatre. She kept her breathing steady and her voice low. "I'm complying," she said. "My identification is in my bag. If you let me explain." "Turn around." Mercer did not raise his voice because he did not need to. The coldness in it was worse. He stepped into her space before she had fully cleared the door, forcing her backward until the edge of the car pressed against her hip. Up close, everything about him felt deliberate, the squared stance, the chest pushed forward, the way he used inches like weapons. "I need you to listen carefully," Nia said, still controlled. "You are making a serious mistake. My credentials will explain everything." He gave a short, disgusted laugh. "Credentials?" The word came out like mockery. "You girls always think a big word fixes your attitude." His hands landed on her shoulders and spun her harder than necessary. Metal from the car door bit cold against her thigh. Then came the search, rough and invasive, his palms moving with the impatience of someone who was not looking for danger so much as enjoying the excuse to put his hands where they did not belong. Nia's jaw tightened, but her voice stayed level. "My credentials are in the front seat compartment," she said. "Check them before you do anything else." He leaned close enough for her to hear the contempt in his breathing. "The more you talk, the worse this gets." He was not going to check. He was going to punish first and justify it later. Dr. Mercer yanked her wrist behind her back and marched her toward the hood as if the decision had already been made somewhere higher than law. "Hands flat," he said. "Spread your feet." The hot metal pressed against her palms. She kept her expression still, though anger was beginning to sharpen beneath the calm. "My name is Nia Brooks," she said, "and if you check what I told you to check, this ends right now." He barked out a laugh. "Nia Brooks," he repeated, tasting the name like it amused him. "Sounds important, does it? Let me guess. You've got connections. You people always do when the cuffs come out." He pulled her wallet from her bag, flipped through it with exaggerated boredom, then held up her driver's license between two fingers. "Nice address," he said. "You borrow this car too, or just the story that goes with it?" Without waiting for an answer, he marched back to the cruiser and ran her name through the system. The screen took longer than he liked. Then the result appeared: restricted access, clearance required, insufficient local authorization. Mercer stared at it, frowned, and made the worst decision available to him. He did not see warning. He saw opportunity. In his mind, restricted did not mean protected. It meant hidden. Sealed record. Trouble. Someone slippery enough to have history scrubbed and still dumb enough to be caught. He looked back at her through the windshield, saw her standing still, shoulders squared, and mistook control for fear. Then headlights appeared in the distance, and another cruiser started closing in behind them fast. The second cruiser slid onto the shoulder in a spray of gravel and stopped hard behind Mercer's unit. A stocky sergeant climbed out, adjusting his duty belt as he approached with the tired confidence of a man used to cleaning up smaller messes. His eyes moved from Mercer to Nia, then to the angle of her body against the hood. "What have we got?" he asked. Mercer answered before she could speak. "Suspicious vehicle. Uncooperative driver. Possible narcotics. Restricted return on the ID." Nia turned her head just enough to look at the sergeant. Her voice changed then. It was no longer cautious. It carried command. "Sergeant, listen carefully. My credentials are in the front seat compartment. Verify them before your officer makes this worse. If you arrest me without checking, you are crossing into something neither of you can undo." The sergeant paused. It was brief, almost invisible, but Nia saw it, the tiny hitch in his posture, the fraction of a second where instinct pushed against routine. He looked at Mercer, then back at her, trying to reconcile the calm in her voice with the picture Mercer had already built for him. This did not sound like panic. It sounded like certainty. Mercer caught the hesitation and stepped on it immediately. "She's bluffing," he snapped. "They always get formal when they know they're caught." Then he jabbed a finger toward the sedan. "Search the car," he ordered. "Start with the front compartment." The sergeant turned toward the vehicle. Nia watched him reach for the passenger door handle. The sergeant opened the passenger door and leaned inside, one hand braced on the roof. At first he found nothing dramatic, which was its own kind of disturbance. The car was old, but not dirty in the way Mercer had expected. No smoke smell, no open containers, no frantic clutter, just a neat row of receipts tucked near the console, a folded road atlas, a half-finished bottle of water, and a canvas bag positioned with almost military precision behind the seat. Then he saw the first thing that made him pause, a spare magazine. He picked it up between two fingers and frowned. Clean. Maintained. Government-grade ammunition, not something usually rolling loose inside a random roadside stop. Mercer stepped closer, annoyance tightening his face. "What is it?" The sergeant didn't answer right away. He opened the front compartment. Inside sat a black leather case stamped in gold. For one suspended second, nobody moved. Mercer took it from him, flipped it open, and felt the night change. The gold shield caught the cruiser lights and flashed back like a blade. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Beneath it, an identification card. The photograph matched the woman against the hood exactly. His throat went dry. The badge seemed to weigh more than metal should. In an instant, every warning she had given him rearranged itself into truth, and his confidence cracked straight down the middle all at once. The sergeant looked from the open case to Mercer's face and saw the answer there before a word was spoken. Shock. Then fear. Then something worse. Mercer snapped the case shut. It happened so fast it almost looked like instinct, but it was not instinct. It was choice. He slid the badge down along his thigh and into the pocket of his uniform pants, hiding it against the dark fabric like a thief palming stolen jewelry. When he straightened, his expression had already changed. The panic was still there, but now it was dressed in anger. "Well?" the sergeant asked quietly. Mercer swallowed once. "Nothing useful," he said. "Just junk." "She's playing games." Nia closed her eyes for half a beat, not in surrender, but in recognition. There it was. The line. Up to this point, he had still been a bully with a badge, dangerous, but possibly recoverable if shame or caution found him in time. That possibility had just died. By hiding federal identification after seeing it with his own eyes, he had crossed into something cleaner, colder, and much harder to survive. He was not trying to be right anymore. He was trying to escape consequence. "You put it in your pocket," Nia said, her voice low and exact. "You just turned a bad stop into a federal crime." Mercer's eyes flashed toward her, and whatever humanity had been flickering inside him hardened into self-protection. "Put her in the car," he said. "She's coming with us." The sergeant hesitated just long enough to expose his uncertainty, so Mercer filled the space with force. "She's impersonating Federal," he said sharply, "and she's trying to scare us off the stop." Open the back door. Nia turned her head. "Sergeant, listen to me. The badge is in his right pocket. If you let him move me, you become part of this." The warning landed, but Mercer shoved past it before it could take hold. He grabbed her by the arm, twisted, and marched her toward the cruiser with sudden violence, using movement to kill thought. Gravel crunched under their feet. The rear door opened. He forced her down into the back seat, one hand on the top of her head, as though she were already convicted of something. "Tow the vehicle," he ordered over his shoulder. "Full impound. Inventory search at the lot. I want every panel checked." The sergeant stood there for 1 tense second, then reached for his radio. That was enough for Mercer. Action looked like agreement, and agreement felt like control. By the time he slid behind the wheel, some of the colour had returned to his face. He had a story now. A suspect. A lie with momentum. Men like him often mistook movement for safety. In the cage behind him, Nia leaned back against the hard plastic seat and let the moment settle. She memorized the time, the turn of the road, the unit number stenciled on the divider, the dispatcher's voice. The names already spoken aloud. She was done trying to stop what had begun. Now she was preparing to bury it. By the time they reached the station, the lie was already growing muscles. Mercer stepped out first and yanked open the rear door before the cruiser had fully settled under the buzzing floodlights of the sally port. "Move," he barked, dragging Nia out by the arm as if urgency itself proved guilt. Inside, the booking room looked less like a place built for truth than a room where truth went to be filed under something safer. Old coffee, wet concrete, fluorescent lights that hummed like bad nerves. A deputy behind the desk barely looked up. Another officer laughed at something on his phone. Nobody seemed surprised to see a woman brought in hard and fast. Mercer used that indifference immediately. Non-compliant stop, he announced to the room in a voice meant to travel. Possible narcotics, fake federal claims, resisting roadside commands. Watch her hands. He said it like a report, but it was performance. Each phrase landed before anyone could ask a question, building a version of events that sounded official enough to borrow authority from the walls themselves. This place had heard lies like that before. You could feel it. Nia let her eyes move once, carefully. Camera in the upper corner, desk monitor angled outward. 2 officers disengaged, one curious, one numb. A holding corridor to the left. Dispatcher window half open. Weak points everywhere if someone knew how to read them. Mercer kept talking, because silence might give her room. Nia lowered her breathing, studied the camera light, and waited for the first moment worth using. Nia waited until Mercer uncuffed one wrist to empty her pockets, then lifted her chin toward the red recording light in the corner. "My name is Nia Brooks," she said clearly, each word measured to carry across the room. "I am a federal agent, and Officer Grant Mercer has taken my credentials and placed them in his right uniform pocket. I am requesting immediate contact with the field office and supervisory review before any further detention." The room changed. Not dramatically. No one rushed to her side. No one shouted that Mercer was finished. But certainty broke. The deputy at the desk stopped typing. The dispatcher behind the glass looked up properly for the first time. One of the younger officers frowned at Mercer's pocket before forcing his expression flat again. That was enough. Mercer saw the shift too, and panic moved through him like electricity. He crossed the distance in 2 hard steps and slammed her forward against the booking counter, his hand between her shoulder blades. Papers slid. A plastic cup tipped over. "She's hallucinating," he snapped. High, combative, and now pretending federal. "You all heard her roadside. This is the same act." He looked around for agreement and found only stillness, which scared him more. "Sell," he said. "Now. We'll process later." That was the tell. Not procedure. Avoidance. He grabbed her arm again and shoved her toward the holding corridor before anyone could ask for badge verification, phone calls, or proper intake review. Nia caught the eye of the dispatcher as she passed. The woman said nothing, but she did not look away. Someone upstairs was about to be pulled into this. Mercer took the stairs 2 at a time and entered the chief's office without knocking. The room was larger than it should have been, lined with plaques, framed commendations, and photographs meant to translate authority into virtue. Chief Warren Cole looked up from his desk with irritation first, then concern when he saw Mercer's face. What happened? Mercer shut the door. Roadside stop. She claimed federal. I checked the car. She had a badge. He swallowed. I have it. That changed everything. Cole stood slowly, hand out. Mercer placed the leather case on the desk. The chief opened it, studied the shield, then the identification card, and went still in a way Mercer had never seen before. Not shock. Calculation. She identify herself on camera? He asked. Mercer hesitated. Yes. In front of witnesses? Yes. Cole closed the case and set it down with deliberate care. His eyes lifted to Mercer, hard now, not confused. He understood immediately that the woman in the cell was not random, not unlucky, and not safe to mishandle. She belonged to something larger, and if she was here undercover, then whatever she was investigating was close enough to breathe on. Listen to me, Cole said quietly. If she walks out of this building, she comes back with warrants, media, and federal muscle. Release is over. That option is dead. Mercer said nothing. Cole slid the badge into his desk drawer. We contain this, he said, and from this moment forward, the truth is, whatever we can make stick. Cole did not raise his voice. That made it worse. He opened the lower drawer of his desk, removed a clear evidence bag containing a small packet of white powder, and placed it beside the badge as casually as another man might set down a pen. Impound lot, he said, driver's side. Hide it deep enough to look discovered, not dropped. Then update the report to support probable cause. Mercer stared at the packet. His mouth had gone dry again. Chief, You are past the point of asking moral questions, Cole said. You crossed that line the moment you pocketed federal credentials. Now you either build a case that survives the first wave, or you hand your life to people who will bury you to save themselves. He slid a second item across the desk, a written note with 2 unit numbers and a server access code. After the plant, go downstairs and report a corrupted roadside file. Make sure bodycam sync is interrupted before review. If anyone asks, there was signal failure on county asphalt near mile marker 11. We've used that explanation before. Used it before. The words hit Mercer harder than the packet did. This was not improvisation. It was process. His old swagger had vanished completely now. What remained was movement driven by fear. He took the drugs, folded the note into his pocket, and nodded too quickly. Yes, sir. Cole leaned back in his chair. Good. And Mercer? Mercer stopped at the door. If she speaks again, isolate her faster. Panic spreads. Mercer left the office with the evidence bag in his hand and the sick understanding that he was no longer covering a mistake. He was entering a machine. The holding cell was narrow, cold, and scrubbed so often it smelled like bleach buried under rust. Naya sat on the steel bench with her hands loosely folded, as if she were waiting for a delayed train instead of measuring the collapse of a police department. She had already counted backward from the stop, matched the drive time to the station, and marked the moment her scheduled check-in had passed. Somewhere beyond those concrete walls, systems were beginning to wake. She did not know how far the alert had travelled yet. That uncertainty did not frighten her. It focused her. Bootsteps came and went in the corridor. A radio crackled. A door slammed. Then, from the next cell, a low voice muttered, "You really federal?" Nia turned slightly toward the cinder block wall. "You heard booking?" "Enough." "Heard him say fake badge." "Heard you say he stole it. Good. What's your name?" she asked. "Leon." "Leon, listen carefully. If anyone asks what happened, you tell them the arresting officer rushed me in, skipped proper intake, and moved me before verification. Tell them I identified myself on camera. Tell them he panicked." Silence. Then, "Why should I? Because when this breaks," Nia said evenly, "truth will matter to somebody in this building for the first time tonight." Leon exhaled a short laugh. "You talk like help's already coming." Nia looked toward the corridor, calm as ever. "It is," she said. "The only question is how close the impound lot sat behind the station under a wash of weak security lights and long shadows, the kind of place where bad decisions could pretend to look official." Mercer parked near the sedan, killed the engine, and stepped out with latex gloves already stretched over his hands. The night air felt thicker here, as if the lot itself had been holding its breath for years. He unlocked the driver's door, slid inside, and moved quickly now, not because he was confident, but because he was terrified of thinking too long. Floor mat up. Fingers under the edge, blade out. A short practice cut through the lining beneath the seat. Then the packet disappeared into the slit, buried just deep enough to be found by a careful officer doing his duty. He sat there for a second afterward, chest rising hard, one gloved hand still pressed to the seat frame. Then he let out a breath that almost sounded like relief. Into the radio, he made his voice steadier than he felt. "Inventory search update," he said. "Located suspected narcotics concealed under the driver's seat. Request scene log and evidence pickup." The reply came back routine, almost bored. That helped. Procedure always helped men like him. The form of legality could calm almost any panic. Mercer stepped out, locked the car, and turned toward the station, lighter than he had been 10 minutes earlier. He never looked up. If he had, he might have noticed the small dark shape hovering above the far fence line, silent and steady, its lens fixed directly on him 50 miles away, inside a secure operations room washed in blue monitor light. Mercer's small act of confidence played back in sharp silence. No one around the central screen spoke at first. They watched the gloved hand, the lifted floor mat, the blade, the hidden packet, then the satisfied posture that followed. The footage ended. A technician rewound 10 seconds and played it again, slower this time. "He planted it," she said. Supervisory Special Agent Daniel Cross stood with both hands braced on the edge of the table, eyes fixed on the screen. He did not curse, he did not pace. He simply absorbed the sequence once, then asked, "Location?" Impound lot behind Pine County Station, the technician replied. Thermal tag from the surveillance unit confirms vehicle match. Agent Brooks's phone signal was last active inside the station perimeter. Her check-in window is now overdue by 23 minutes. Cross nodded once. Probability she's still inside? High. A second analyst spoke without looking away from her laptop. Local dispatch traffic suggests rushed booking language, incomplete intake pattern, and immediate movement to holding. They're not processing her cleanly, they're containing her. That changed the room without changing anyone's volume. Cross straightened. So we have wrongful detention, stolen credentials, planted evidence, and likely coordinated cover-up. Yes, sir. He looked around the table, meeting each face in turn. Then this is no longer observation, he said. This is active intervention. No one wasted a second reacting. Chairs moved, files closed, gear cases opened. Somewhere under the calm, the full weight of consequence had finally chosen a direction. Cross moved from the monitor wall to the center table and spoke with a kind of calm that made everyone else move faster. Record this as a federal abduction with evidence tampering and probable civil rights conspiracy, he said. The local stop is no longer a roadside incident. It is a hostile corruption event involving a detained federal agent and active fabrication of criminal charges. One agent was already on the phone with Tactical Command. Another opened a live county map. The technician pushed the station blueprint to the main display. Cross pointed once at the rear lot, once at the holding corridor, then at the main desk. Outer perimeter first. No exits. No silent departures. I want the impound lot secured, all cameras preserved, and every server in that building frozen before somebody gets clever. Yes, sir. State liaison? Already standing by. Good. Bring them. This goes cleaner with witnesses. The room did not feel louder as the scale increased. It felt sharper. Vehicle assignments were made in clipped, quiet sentences. Air support was confirmed. An arrest packet began printing before anyone was on the road. Cross picked up his jacket from the back of a chair and slipped one arm into it. We move hard, he said, but we move lawful. Nobody improvises. Nobody grandstands. We are going in to retrieve our agent, preserve evidence, and take control of a compromised scene. Then he looked once more at the last frame of Mercer walking away from the planted drugs. Let's go remind them, he said, what consequence sounds like. Back at the station. The machinery of denial tried to sound ordinary. Mercer sat at a terminal, typing with stiff fingers, building a report that turned force into compliance and panic into procedure. Uncooperative subject. Possible narcotics. False federal claim. Every sentence was less a record than a sandbag against the flood he could feel coming. Behind the desk, the dispatcher avoided his eyes while calls. In records, a deputy carried old files to the shred bin. Upstairs, Chief Cole moved through his office with efficiency, pulling folders, pocketing a flash drive, and deciding which version of the night might survive scrutiny now. No one said the word fear. It was in the room anyway. The station had the strained stillness of a house, pretending not to hear thunder. Keyboards clicked. A printer spat out forms. A radio murmured traffic no one was listening to. Mercer kept typing because movement felt safer than thought. Then the desk phone rang. The dispatcher answered, gave the standard greeting, and listened. Her posture changed first. Her shoulders straightened. The colour drained from her face. Slowly she stood, headset cord stretching across her blouse. Mercer looked up. Who is it? Her lips parted, but for a moment nothing came out. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. He says he's with the Bureau, she said. He told me to tell you to look outside. Mercer rose so fast his chair skidded backward across the floor. For a second he considered refusing, as if disobedience could somehow keep reality outside the glass. Then he walked to the front doors with the chief at his shoulder and the dispatcher frozen behind them both. The parking lot was no longer a parking lot. It was a perimeter. Black federal SUVs blocked every exit with mathematical precision, nose to tail, angled so nothing could slip between them. Tactical trucks sat farther back like heavy punctuation. Red and blue light bars strobed across the station walls, but there was none of the sloppy confusion Mercer associated with local raids or traffic pile-ups. Every beam, every engine, every body outside seemed placed by design. Men and women in tactical gear were already in position behind open doors and concrete barriers, rifles low but ready. On 2 rooftops across the street, dark silhouettes held long sight lines on the building. A helicopter cut through the night above them, its searchlight pinning the front of the station in hard white light so bright Mercer had to squint. No sirens screamed now, no one shouted. That was the worst part. The silence felt official, settled, final. They had not come to negotiate the truth. They had come to take control of it. Behind Mercer, somebody whispered, "Oh God." And just like that, the station stopped pretending. Chief Cole understood before anyone else did. Mercer saw it happen in the chief's face, the quick internal collapse of every remaining option, the cold acceptance that the building was finished. The old man reached for his belt, unfastened the holster, and let the weight of the weapon sag in his hand. "We open the door," Cole said quietly. "Now." Nobody reaches for anything. Nobody talks unless spoken to. Mercer stared at him. "That's it?" Cole turned, and for the first time that night there was no protection in his expression. Only contempt. That was it the moment you touched that badge. The words hit, but not deep enough. Panic had already gotten underneath reason. Mercer's eyes moved once toward the holding corridor, and some final, diseased version of confidence returned. If he had her, maybe they slowed down. If he had her, maybe he still had leverage. Men like Mercer always mistook desperation for strategy. Before anyone could stop him, he snatched his service weapon from the desk, shoved past the dispatcher, and ran. Mercer. Cole barked. He was already through the security door, boots hammering the hall, breath tearing in and out of his chest. Radios erupted behind him. Somewhere out front, a loudspeaker came alive, ordering the building to stand down. Mercer ignored it. He fumbled for the key ring as he reached the cells, heart slamming so hard it felt like impact. He was still thinking force could save him. He was about to learn what waited on the other side of that door. The key scraped once, missed, then found the lock. Mercer shoved the cell door open so hard it rang against the concrete wall. He came in with the gun already raised, chest heaving, eyes bright with the wild certainty of a man who had run past every sensible choice and could no longer tell the difference between escape and collapse. "Get up," he snapped. "Now." Nia rose from the steel bench without hurry. The fluorescent light cut across one side of her face, leaving the other in shadow. She did not back away. She did not ask what he was doing. She looked at the weapon, then at him, and understood immediately what panic had turned him into. "You're done, Mercer," she said. "Move," he barked, stepping closer. "You walk in front of me. Nice and slow. You say one wrong thing, I put you down and tell them you rushed me." Outside the cell, the corridor carried the muffled thunder of boots and shouted commands. Someone hit the outer door to the holding wing. Someone else yelled his name. The sound only sharpened his fear. Mercer reached for her with his free hand, trying to drag her into position, trying to turn her body into cover, into leverage, into one final lie he could hide behind. Nia let him come. Her breathing stayed even. Her weight shifted once, almost invisibly, into balance. The fear he expected to see in her never arrived. What met him, instead, was focus, cold, measured, and complete. Then his fingers touched her arm. Mercer's fingers closed on her sleeve, and that was the last moment he controlled anything. Nia moved on the breath he wasted. Her left hand shot to his wrist, not grabbing wildly, but locking with practiced precision just above the joint. At the same time, she pivoted off the bench, stepping inside the line of the gun instead of away from it. The muzzle jerked sideways. Mercer's reflex tightened, but the shot had nowhere clean to go. It cracked into the concrete wall, deafening in the small cell. He flinched. She did not. Nia drove the heel of her palm sharply under his jaw. His head snapped back, balance gone in an instant. Before he could recover, she twisted the captured wrist hard enough to tear the weapon free. The gun clattered across the floor and spun into the corridor. Mercer stumbled once, trying to grab her, but she was already past him. Her leg swept behind his knee, while her shoulder hit his chest with compact force. He went down ugly, all shock and dead weight, crashing onto the concrete with the air punched out of him. By the time he understood he had fallen, Nia was above him with one knee pinning his upper arm and her forearm pressed across his throat just hard enough to stop movement. The whole fight had lasted seconds. The man who had treated the badge like a weapon was now flat on his back, blinking up at the ceiling, stripped of force, stripped of myth, and waiting for the door to fill with witnesses' dot boots thundered down the corridor a heartbeat later. Federal agents. Don't move. The command arrived with the force of impact, followed by a flood of black tactical gear filling the doorway, rifles trained, eyes cold and exact. For one suspended second, every angle in the room belonged to them. Nia eased the pressure from Mercer's throat, but did not rise until two agents were on him. They rolled him hard onto his stomach, yanked his arms behind his back, and cinched restraints down with metallic finality. Mercer did not fight. The man who had barked orders on the roadside and strutted through booking now looked smaller somehow, as if fear had taken mass from his bones. Sweat ran into his eyes. His breathing came fast and thin. The arrogance was gone. So was the performance. He turned his head enough to see Nia standing over him, calm again, jacket wrinkled, hair slightly out of place, expression unreadable. "I didn't know," he said, and the words came out cracked, almost childlike. "I swear, I didn't know." Nia looked at him for a long moment, not with triumph, but with something colder. "That's the point," she said. "You should not have needed to know who I was to treat me like a human being." The words landed harder than the restraints. An agent hauled Mercer upright. He sagged between their hands, blinking into the hall lights as if he had never seen them before. Now that the man was caught, the real work could finally begin. By dawn, Mercer had been translated from officer to inventory. At the Federal Processing Center, nobody called him by rank, and nobody pretended his badge had ever meant anything beyond evidence. His belt came off first, then the holstered weapon, then the radio, then the shirt he had once worn like armor. Each item was sealed in a clear bag, labeled, logged, and taken from him by hands that were brisk, bored, and unmoved by whatever authority had once followed his name. He asked for professional courtesy once. The agent patting him down did not even look up. Shoelaces. Watch. Wallet. Pocket knife. Wedding band. Everything went into plastic. Then came the command to strip, delivered in the same flat tone he had used on other people for years. The room was cold enough to bite. Mercer obeyed because there was nothing left to disobey with. By the time the orange jumpsuit landed against his chest, he no longer looked like the man from the roadside. He looked processed, ordinary, and afraid. Hours later, shackled at the wrists, Mercer was led into an interrogation room with a steel table and a mirrored wall. Nia was already seated on the other side, a file open before her, calm as if she had been waiting all night. Only then did he understand it. She was not part of his problem. She was all of it now, completely. Nia did not begin with a speech. She opened the file, removed a glossy still image, and slid it across the table. Mercer looked down and saw himself in the impound lot, glove on one hand, knife in the other, bent over the driver's seat of her car. Before he could speak, she placed a second image beside it, the evidence packet halfway beneath the floor lining. Then a third, Chief Cole's office, desk drawer open, badge on the wood, white powder in a clear bag between them. Mercer stared at the photographs as if enough silence might blur them. Nia pressed a button on the recorder. His own voice filled the room from a hidden microphone capture, flat and unmistakable. Inventory search update. Located suspected narcotics concealed under the driver's seat. Then Cole's voice followed, colder still. Release is over. We contain this. Something inside Mercer gave way. Not all at once. It happened in layers. First went the roadside version, then the booking room version, then the private version he had been building for himself. The one where maybe this could still be explained as panic, confusion, procedure, bad timing. Each image, each line of audio, stripped another place to hide. By the time Nia closed the folder, he was no longer defending a story. He was sitting in the ruins of it. His eyes lifted to hers, raw now. "What happens?" he asked. "If I tell you everything?" Nia did not answer immediately. She let the question sit between them until the silence itself became pressure. Then she said, "Chief Cole is already talking." Mercer's head came up sharply. "No." "He was offered the same thing you're asking for now," Nia said. "Distance from the ugliest counts in exchange for cooperation. Men like him survive by finding someone lower to bury. You know that. You've probably helped him do it before." The words hit because they were true long before they were tactical. Mercer looked down at his cuffs. In that small motion, she could see the final shift beginning, the ugly realization that whatever loyalty had once held the department together had always flowed upward, never down. The chief had not protected him. The chief had used him. The badge had not made him untouchable. It had made him useful. When Mercer finally spoke, the first details came out flat and slow. Cash from towing contracts. Evidence lockers skimmed when seizures ran high. Street stops that turned into off-book shakedowns. Names of officers who planted, prosecutors who ignored, deputies who rewrote reports, dispatchers who knew which calls to lose. Then more came. A lawyer who funneled payoff money through community grants. A judge who signed warrants too fast. Prior stops built on the same smell of marijuana lie. It widened with every sentence. By the time he paused for breath, the traffic stop on County Road 11 no longer looked like a single act of corruption. It looked like a loose thread pulled from a much larger fabric, one now beginning to tear in public. The fallout moved faster than anyone inside Pine County had imagined possible. Within 48 hours, the roadside body cam, the impound surveillance, and selected booking room footage had been released under federal authority. Viewers across the country watched Mercer lie, watched Neil warn him, watched him pocket the badge, watched him plant the drugs, and watched the station drown in its own panic. Protesters gathered outside the building before dawn with handmade signs and phone screens held high. Reporters camped on the sidewalk. Former defendants began calling attorneys. Then came Leon from the holding cell, then the dispatcher, then 2 deputies who had spent years pretending not to notice patterns they could no longer survive. Grand jury indictments followed in a wave. Mercer, Chief Cole, 3 deputies, 1 prosecutor, 1 tow contractor, and an evidence clerk. Court became a theatre of reversal. Mercer sat at the defence table in County Beige, while prosecutors played his own words back to him in clear, unhurried clips. "You people always want to act smart first. Inventory search update. Possible narcotics." Every lie returned polished and amplified. The verdict, when it came, was clean and total. Guilty on federal civil rights violations. Guilty on evidence tampering. Guilty on obstruction. Guilty on kidnapping under colour of authority. The judge's sentence landed like a door closing for good 22 years in federal custody without early release eligibility. Mercer did not look up, but the story was not finished with him, yet Mercer's prison life did not arrive with drama. It arrived with repetition. Count, tray, yard, count, again. The days were not violent in the cinematic way people imagined. They were smaller than that, and somehow crueler. Doors opened by schedule, not by his will. Commands came from men younger than him who had no interest in his past. Nobody cared that he had once walked into rooms expecting silence. Nobody cared that he had worn a badge, carried a sidearm, or spoken to frightened people like he owned their pulse. Inside federal custody, the things he had used as social currency outside were worth less than lint. He had a number now, and the number travelled farther than his name did. The mirrors were the hardest part. Not because they showed age, though they did that too, but because they showed reduction. The chest-forward swagger was gone. The eyes had changed shape. Even his posture looked edited down, as though the institution had sanded off everything performative and left only the man beneath it. For a long time, Mercer tried to think of the case as bad luck. One stop, one woman, one wrong night. Prison killed that story slowly. By the second year, routine had done what the courtroom could not. It had forced him to sit still long enough to recognize the pattern. This was not one unlucky decision collapsing onto him from nowhere. It was a lifetime of small permissions, of cruelty practiced often enough to become reflex, finally maturing into consequence. Nia Brooks did not build a life around what happened on County Road 11. That was part of what made her difficult to defeat. By the time Mercer had settled into the repetition of prison, she was already in another office, under another set of lights, reading another file that smelled faintly of smoke and old paper. The promotion had come quietly, announced in a short memo and a handshake she accepted without ceremony. Her new badge opened heavier doors, but it had not changed the way she carried herself. Calm, alert, unimpressed by titles. On the wall behind her desk hung no framed newspaper clipping, no photo from the raid, no trophy carved from someone else's collapse. She kept the case closed where it belonged. When colleagues mentioned Mercer, or the station, or the footage that had run for weeks on every network that mattered, she listened without savouring it. Justice had been necessary, that was all. What remained with her was not revenge, but clarity. Power, left unchecked, always mistook silence for permission. Her work was to interrupt that mistake before it hardened into routine. Late one evening, she closed the Pine County file, set it in archive storage, and opened a thinner folder from another jurisdiction. A deputy sheriff, missing evidence. Rural complaints. Familiar patterns. She read the first page, uncapped her pen, and got back to work before dawn arrived. Power rarely announces its corruption in grand speeches. More often, it reveals itself in the ordinary moments, in the tone of a command, in the confidence of a lie, in the quiet assumption that another human being can be handled without dignity. That was the real story of Grant Mercer. Not that he made one terrible mistake, but that he had lived so long without consequence that he mistook his habits for law. Nia Brooks was never dangerous to him because of the badge in her car or the federal office behind her name. She was dangerous because she remained fully herself in the face of borrowed power. Calm without surrender, clear without performance, she did not defeat him with rage. She defeated him by staying intact long enough for truth to catch up. And truth did catch up. It moved through cameras, witnesses, reports, courtrooms, prison gates, and all the dull machinery of consequence until the world looked different again. Not perfect, not healed forever, just corrected, at least for a while, in one place where correction had long been overdue. That is often how justice arrives in the real world, not as thunder, not as miracle, as pressure, as record, as the slow, undeniable collapse of a lie that has finally run out of places to stand. Somewhere beyond the reach of county lights and roadside arrogance, another file was already opening. Another name, another pattern, another chance for power to forget itself, and another chance for truth to remind